Pierre Dubois never imagined that a simple stroll down the Champs-Élysées on a sunny March afternoon would completely change his life. At 42, this Parisian accountant had finally found some peace after 6 long years of mourning. 6 years since his wife Ayşe, a young Turkish woman of only 28, died in a terrible car accident in Turkey. Pierre's life began to fall apart in 2018. He had met Ayşe 2 years earlier when she was working as an interpreter for a tourism company that organized cultural trips between France and Turkey. She was a stunning woman with long brown hair and almond-shaped eyes that seemed to hold all the secrets of the East. Pierre was immediately enchanted not only by her beauty, but also by her intelligence and determination. Ayşe spoke 4 languages fluently and dreamed of opening her own translation agency. The romance was intense from the start. Pierre, who had spent years focused solely on work after a difficult divorce, found in Ayşe a passion he thought he had lost forever. She, in turn, saw in Pierre a stability she had never known. She came from a poor family in Istanbul and had fought hard to achieve her education and independence. They were married in an intimate ceremony in Paris in 2017, attended only by a few close friends of Pierre's and Ayşe's younger brother Mehmet, who had come especially from Turkey. Pierre clearly remembered that tall, dark-haired 25-year-old who barely spoke French but showed genuine affection for his sister. During their honeymoon in Nice, Ayşe talked constantly about her plans to bring Mehmet to France, to help him find work and better opportunities. Everything seemed perfect until the fall of 2018. Ayşe received an urgent call from Turkey. Her father had suffered a heart attack. She left immediately for Istanbul, promising to return in a week. Pierre offered to accompany her, but she insisted it wasn't necessary, that she would resolve everything quickly and return home. Their last phone conversation was on Tuesday night. Ayşe seemed strange, distant, but explained that she was just worried about her father. On Thursday morning, Pierre received the call that destroyed his life. It was Mehmet, speaking broken French between sobs. Ayşe had died in a car accident on the highway between Istanbul and Ankara. The car had overturned and caught fire. There was nothing left to bury. Pierre flew immediately to Turkey, but arrived only for a funeral without a body, an Islamic ceremony that seemed unreal. Mehmet was devastated, younger and more lost than Pierre remembered. Ayşe's family, whom Pierre knew only superficially, was immersed in mourning. No one spoke French except Mehmet, and Pierre felt completely lost amid rituals and traditions he did not understand. The documents were all correct: death certificate, police report, everything official and stamped. Pierre tried to see the accident site, but it had already been cleaned up. The Turkish authorities were sympathetic but firm. There was no doubt Ayşe Dubois had died on October 25, 2018. Back in Paris, Pierre sank into a deep depression. The apartment they had shared became a mausoleum. He kept everything exactly as Ayşe had left it, her clothes in the closet, her language books on the shelf. Even the coffee mug she used every morning remained in its place in the kitchen. The first 2 years were the worst. Pierre could barely work, lost a lot of weight, and completely isolated himself from his friends. Mehmet would call occasionally from Istanbul, always sad, sharing the pain of loss. Pierre even sent some money a few times, knowing that Ayşe's family was struggling financially. It was only in 2020, during the pandemic, that Pierre began therapy. Slowly, very slowly, he began to rebuild his life. He started exercising again, began cooking again, even went out a few times with co-workers. He wasn't ready for another relationship, perhaps he never would be, but he had found a way to live with the pain. In 2022, he finally decided to travel again. He started small, with weekends in Normandy and a week in Brittany. In 2023, he felt brave enough to visit places he and Ayşe had planned to see together. He went to Barcelona in the spring and Prague in the summer. Each trip was a small victory against grief. proof that he could honor Aishi's memory by living the life she would have wanted him to live. On the morning of March 15, 2024, Pierre woke up with a strange feeling. He wasn't superstitious, but something felt different in the air. He decided to cancel his plans to stay home and organize documents, a task he had been putting off for months, and go for a walk instead. Paris was beautiful at that time of year, with the first spring flowers beginning to appear in the parks. He walked aimlessly through the familiar streets, remembering the times he and Aishi had walked the same path. She loved shopping on the Champs-Élysées, especially in cosmetics and perfume stores. Pierre smiled sadly as he remembered how she would spend hours testing fragrances, always asking for his opinion, always undecided between 2 or 3 options. It was almost 2 in the afternoon when he arrived at the famous avenue. It was busy as usual, tourists and Parisians mingling in a chaotic dance of shopping and rushing. Pierre decided to have lunch at one of the cafes Aishi used to frequent. He was almost there when something made him stop completely. 100 meters away, coming out of an electronics store, was a woman who looked exactly like his dead wife. The world stopped. Pierre felt as if all reality around him had become liquid, unstable, unreal. His knees trembled and he had to lean on a lamppost to keep from falling. The woman was exactly the same height as Aishi, had the same long brown hair, the same gait. That elegant, determined stride he had admired thousands of times. She had her back to him, walking in the opposite direction, but Pierre knew every curve of that body, every movement of those shoulders. She was wearing a red blouse he had never seen before, but her haircut was identical. For a terrible and wonderful moment, Pierre thought he was hallucinating, having a psychotic episode caused by the accumulated stress of the last few years. Without thinking, he began to follow her. His steps were clumsy, he bumped into people, muttering automatic apologies without taking his eyes off the figure in front of him. The woman stopped at a newsstand, and Pierre took the opportunity to get closer. He hid behind a group of Japanese tourists and watched. She bought a magazine, paid in cash, and smiled at the vendor. That smile. Pierre felt his heart stop completely. It was exactly the same smile Aishi had when she was satisfied with a purchase, when she had gotten a good deal, or found something she had been looking for a long time. The same slight squint of the eyes, the same curve of the lips. When she turned slightly to put the magazine in her bag, Pierre saw her profile. There was no doubt about it. It was Aishi, his Aishi. Alive, breathing, buying magazines in Paris as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't died 6 years ago on a Turkish road. The woman resumed walking, and Pierre followed her, keeping a safe distance. His mind was a whirlwind of impossible questions. How was this possible? Was he sure she had died? He had seen the documents, been at the funeral, mourned her death for years. Could the documents have been wrong? Could it have been a terrible misunderstanding? She entered a small, cozy cafe on Rue de Rivoli. Pierre hesitated at the entrance, his heart beating so hard that he was sure everyone could hear it. He took a deep breath and went in, choosing a table in the back, far enough away not to be noticed, but close enough to observe. The woman ordered a coffee and a croissant. Aishi always ate croissants when she was nervous or worried about something. Pierre watched her every move, every gesture, looking for differences, for proof that he was wrong. But everything was familiar, everything was hers. Then he noticed something that made him freeze. On the woman's right hand, on her ring finger, was the wedding ring he had given Aishi. A unique piece he had had specially made, with a small emerald in the center, and Arabic engravings that meant eternal love. There were no 2 rings like it in the world. The woman took her cell phone out of her purse and made a call. Pierre strained to hear what she was saying, but she was too far away and the cafe was too noisy. She spoke softly, cautiously, looking around as if afraid of being overheard. The conversation lasted only a few minutes, but Pierre noticed that she seemed agitated, making nervous gestures with her free hand. When she finished the call, the woman stared at the phone screen for several minutes. Her face showed an expression that Pierre knew well. Aishi made exactly the same face when she was making a difficult decision. She bit her lower lip slightly and frowned, lost in deep thought. After finishing her coffee, she got up to go to the bathroom. Pierre seized the opportunity. He knew it was crazy, that he was violating her privacy, but he needed to be sure. He approached the table and quickly glanced at the magazine she had bought. It was a Turkish edition of a women's magazine. In the upper right corner, handwritten in a font he knew better than his own, was the name Aish. Pierre ran back to his table, his heart racing. There was no longer any doubt. It was her. But how? And why? Why had she made him believe she was dead? Why had she disappeared from his life so cruelly? When she returned from the bathroom, Pierre made a desperate decision. He could no longer live with the doubt. He couldn't let her leave without knowing the truth. He stood up, walked over to her desk and whispered, "Aishi?" The woman looked up, and Pierre saw her eyes widen with pure terror. For a split second, recognition and panic fought on her face. Then she did something Pierre would never forget. She smiled like a confused stranger and replied in heavily accented French, "Sorry, monsieur, you must be confusing me with someone else." But Pierre had seen it. In those first few seconds, before she could control her reaction, he had seen the recognition, the fear, and something else. Guilt. Aishi had recognized him and was deliberately lying. Pierre stood frozen beside the table, feeling as if he had been punched in the stomach. The woman, who was unmistakably his dead wife, continued to look at him with an expression of polite confusion, as if he were a disturbed man who had approached her for no reason. But he had seen the truth in that first moment of recognition. "I'm sure you're Aishi," Pierre said, his voice trembling. "Aishi Dubois, my wife." The woman shook her head, maintaining her forced smile. "I'm sorry, but you're mistaken. My name is Elif Özkan. I'm just a tourist here in Paris." She made a move to get up, but Pierre gently blocked her path. "The ring," he said, pointing to her hand. "That's the ring I gave you. I had it specially made. It has an emerald and Arabic engravings. There is no other like it in the world." For a moment, Elif's face faltered. She looked at her own hand as if she had completely forgotten about the ring. This ring belonged to my sister. She died, and I wear it to remember her." "Your sister?" Pierre sat down in the chair opposite her, ignoring the curious glances of the other customers in the cafe. "What was your sister's name?" "Aishi," she replied automatically, then seemed to realize her mistake. "I mean, her name was Zeynep. Zeynep was my name." Pierre felt a mixture of anger and despair. "You're lying. I know you're Aishi. I know every gesture you make, every expression. You just said your dead sister's name was Aishi, and now you say it was Zeynep. Why are you doing this to me?" The woman stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "You're scaring me. I'll call the police if you don't leave me alone." But her voice trembled, and Pierre could see that her hands were shaking. "Aishi, please," Pierre begged, standing up as well. "I know it's you. If there's a reason, if you were in danger, if you had to fake your own death, we can work this out. I spent 6 years crying for you, 6 years thinking I had lost the most important person in my life." For a moment, her mask almost slipped. Pierre saw tears welling up in her eyes, saw pain cross her face. But then she hardened again. "You're confused. I've never seen you before in my life." She tried to push past him, but Pierre gently held her arm. "The scar," he said desperately. "You have a small scar on your left wrist, from when you fell off your bike at age 10. You told me that story on our second date." The woman looked at her left wrist, and Pierre saw the panic in her eyes. The scar was there, exactly where he knew it would be. Small, discreet, but unmistakable. "Many people have scars," she said, but her voice was almost inaudible now. "What about the tattoo behind your left ear?" Pierre continued. "A small Turkish symbol that means protection. You got it when you were 18, against your parents' wishes." The woman instinctively brought her hand to her ear, covering the tattoo. That involuntary gesture was the final confirmation Pierre needed. "AC," he said softly. "It's me, Pierre, your husband. Why are you doing this? Why did you fake your own death? What happened?" For a long moment they stared at each other in silence. Pierre could see an internal war raging on Aishi's face. Finally, she whispered, "You don't understand. You can't understand. I have to go." She tried to leave again, but this time Pierre didn't physically stop her. Instead, he said loudly enough for her to hear, "Does Mehmet know you're alive?" Aishi stopped as if she had hit an invisible wall. She turned slowly, and now Pierre could see genuine terror in her eyes. What do you know about Mehmet?" "Your brother," Pierre said, approaching cautiously. "He called me to tell me about your death. He was at your funeral. He sent money to your family several times over the last few years because Mehmet told me they were struggling." Aishi's face went completely pale. "You sent money?" "Of course I did. You were the only family I had left after I thought you had died." Aishi shook her head violently. No, that shouldn't have happened. Mehmet promised that..." She stopped abruptly, realizing she had revealed too much. "Mehmet promised what?" Pierre took another step toward her. "Aishi, what's going on? Why did your own brother make me believe you were dead?" The tears she had been trying to hold back finally began to stream down her face. "You don't understand," she repeated. "If they find out you found me, that you know I'm alive..." "Who are they?" Pierre interrupted. "Who will find out? What are you afraid of?" Aishi looked around the cafe as if she expected to see someone dangerous watching them. "I can't talk here. It's too dangerous." "Then let's go somewhere else," Pierre said immediately. "Let's go home, to our apartment. Remember, I kept everything exactly as you left it." "No!" she exclaimed, too loudly, causing other people to look. She lowered her voice. "I can't go there. They might be following me." Pierre felt a chill of fear. "Who could be following you?" "Aishi, what kind of danger have you gotten yourself into?" She quickly wiped away her tears and looked at him with an expression that mixed love, despair, and something that looked like pure terror. "Pierre, you have to forget you saw me today. You have to pretend you never found me. If you love me, if you ever loved me, you'll do this for me." "How can you ask me that?" Pierre's voice was broken. "I spent 6 years of my life in mourning, 6 years believing I had lost you forever. And now I find out you're alive, that you chose to abandon me, and you want me to just pretend nothing happened?" "It wasn't a choice," she whispered. "It was never a choice." Before Pierre could respond, Aishi's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and paled even further. "I have to take this," she said, but Pierre could see that her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. "Hello?" she answered in Turkish. Pierre didn't understand the words, but he could hear the aggressive tone of the voice on the other end of the line. Aishi responded in monosyllables, nervously glancing at Pierre. When the call ended, she was visibly terrified. "I have to leave now, immediately." "Aishi, no." Pierre held her hand. "Don't leave me again. Not without explaining what's going on." She looked at him with such intensity that Pierre felt his heart break. "Tonight at midnight," she whispered quickly. "Alexandra III Bridge, on the right bank. If you really love me, if you want to know the truth, be there. But Pierre..." She squeezed his hand tightly. "If you come, your life will never be the same again. Some truths destroy everything." With those words, she let go and ran out of the cafe, leaving Pierre alone with 1,000 questions and the terrible certainty that his life had just become much more dangerous. Pierre sat in the cafe for almost an hour after Aish disappeared, trying to process what had just happened. His mind was in complete chaos. The woman he had mourned for 6 years was alive, clearly terrified, and had arranged to meet him at midnight. But what was most disturbing was the growing certainty that Mehmet, the brother he had comforted, who had received his money and his compassion, was involved in an elaborate lie. When he finally managed to move, Pierre walked through the streets of Paris like an automaton. Everything looked different now, as if the city had changed color. The same streets he had walked that morning with nostalgic melancholy now seemed threatening, full of shadows and sinister possibilities. Back at his apartment, Pierre went straight to the room he had kept as a sanctuary to Aish's memory. He opened the drawer where he kept all the documents related to her death. Death certificate, police report, photos from the funeral. Everything looked official. Everything looked real. How could she possibly be alive? He picked up the phone and called Mehmet. It was almost 8 p.m. in Paris, which meant 10 p.m. in Turkey. The phone rang several times before a familiar voice answered. "Pierre?" Mehmet sounded surprised. "Is everything okay? It's been a while since we last spoke." "Mehmet?" Pierre tried to keep his voice calm. "I need to ask you something about Aishi." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "What do you want to know?" "I thought we had already talked about everything." "Are you absolutely sure she died in that accident? There's no possibility of an error in the documents." The pause was even longer this time. "Pierre, why are you asking this? Has something happened? Answer my question," Pierre insisted. "Did you see Aishi's body? Did you see her dead with your own eyes?" No," Mehmet admitted reluctantly. "The accident was very serious. The car caught fire. There was nothing left to see. But the documents, the documents could be forged," Pierre interrupted. "Mehmet, I'm asking you, as her brother, as someone who knew her better than anyone else, are you absolutely sure Aishi is dead?" The silence that followed was deafening. Pierre could hear his own breathing, his heart beating. Finally, Mehmet spoke, and his voice was different, more tense. "Pierre, you're scaring me. Why are you asking these things?" "Because I saw her today," Pierre said simply. The sound that came from the other end of the line was as if Mehmet had dropped the phone. After several seconds, he came back. "That's impossible. You must be confusing." "It was her, Mehmet. I would recognize her anywhere. I spoke to her. She recognized me too, but pretended not to know me. And she was wearing the wedding ring I gave her, the one with the emerald and the Arabic engravings." "Pierre, you need help," Mehmet said quickly. "I know it's been hard for you, but Aishi is dead. She died 6 years ago. Maybe you should talk to a psychologist." "Stop lying to me," Pierre exploded. "I know you're lying. I can hear it in your voice. What happened to Aishi? Why did you make me believe she was dead?" Mehmet hung up the phone. Pierre tried calling back several times, but the calls went straight to voicemail. Each attempt confirmed his growing suspicions that Mehmet was deeply involved in whatever had happened to Aishi. It was almost 10 o'clock at night when Pierre made a decision. He couldn't wait until midnight without doing anything. He needed answers. And if Mehmet wasn't going to give them to him, maybe he could find them some other way. He went to his computer and began searching. First, he looked for news of the car accident that had supposedly killed Aishi. He found a small mention in a local Turkish newspaper, just a few lines about a fatal accident on the Istanbul-Ankara highway. No names were mentioned, no specific details. For an accident that had been so devastating that nothing of the victim remained to be buried, there seemed to be surprisingly little media coverage. Next, Pierre began researching how to forge official documents in Turkey. What he found left him cold. There were entire networks of corruption, civil servants who could be bribed to create false documents. Death certificates, police reports, even hospital records could be fabricated for a sufficiently large sum of money. But why would Aishi do that? Why would she fake her own death and abandon a comfortable life in Paris? And why would Mehmet help her? Pierre remembered the times he had sent money to the family after Aishi's death. It was always Mehmet who had asked for help, claiming that the family was experiencing financial difficulties. Pierre had sent almost 15,000 euros over the years without questioning, without asking for receipts. Now he realized how naive he had been. At 11:30 p.m., Pierre left his house and headed for the Alexandre III Bridge. Paris was quiet at that hour, with only a few cars passing through the illuminated streets. He arrived at the bridge 15 minutes early and chose a spot in the shadows where he could watch without being seen. The Alexandre III Bridge was one of the most beautiful in Paris, with its golden decorations and spectacular view of the Seine. During the day, it was always full of tourists taking pictures, but at midnight, it was practically deserted, with only a few occasional people walking hurriedly home. At exactly midnight, Pierre saw a female figure approaching from the right bank, exactly where Aishi had arranged to meet him. She was wearing a dark coat and a beret that partially covered her face, but Pierre recognized her immediately. He stepped out of the shadows and walked toward her. When she saw him, she stopped and looked around nervously, as if checking to make sure they weren't being watched. "You came," she said when he approached her. "Of course I came," Pierre replied. "Now tell me the truth. Everything." Aishi closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering her courage. When she opened them again, Pierre saw a deep, ancient sadness that made him realize that the story he was about to hear would change everything forever. "Before I begin," she said softly, "you need to understand that every word I'm about to say puts your life in danger. You still have time to leave, to pretend you never met me, to go back to your safe life." Pierre looked into the face of the woman he had loved and mourned for 6 years. "I no longer have a safe life," he said. "Not after today. Tell me everything." Aishi took a deep breath and began, "My real name isn't Aishi. It never was. And Mehmet isn't my brother." Pierre felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "What do you mean? Of course Mehmet is your brother. He was at our wedding. He called me when you faked your death." "Mehmet is my husband," Aishi said softly, the words falling like bombs between them. "My real husband. We got married in Turkey when I was 17. It was an arranged marriage by our families." Pierre shook his head violently. "That doesn't make sense. You told me you'd never been married before. You said I was your first true love." "It was a lie," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "It was all a lie, Pierre. My real name is Zehra Özkan. Aishi was my older sister. She died when I was 15 of leukemia." Pierre pulled away from her, feeling physically sick. "Then who are you? Who did I marry? Who have I lived with for 2 years?" "I'm Zehra," she repeated. "And you were the best part of my life, Pierre. The only real and honest part I ever had." "Honest?" Pierre almost shouted, then remembered where they were and lowered his voice. "How can you call that honest? You lied about your name, your age, your family, your past. Our marriage isn't even legal." "It is legal," she said quickly. "Aishi's identity documents are real. When she died, I assumed her identity. In Turkey, that's not so difficult when you know the right people." Pierre began pacing back and forth on the bridge, trying to process the information. "Why? Why did you do that? Why did you assume your dead sister's identity?" "To escape," Zehra said simply. "Mehmet, he's not a good man, Pierre. He's violent, controlling. He's part of a human trafficking ring that operates between Turkey and Europe. When I married him, I didn't know. I thought he was just a businessman." "Human trafficking?" Pierre stopped walking and stared at her. "What are you talking about? Mehmet and his associates bring young women from Turkey to Europe with false promises of work or marriage. Then they force them into prostitution or slave labor. Zara wiped away her tears. By the time I found out, it was too late. I was pregnant. Pierre felt the world spin. Pregnant? You had a child with him? A daughter, she whispered. Her name is Elif. She's 9 now. 9, Pierre repeated mechanically. So when you met me, Elif was 3, Zara confirmed. Mehmet kept her as collateral for my behavior. He said that if I tried to run away or tell anyone about his business, he would kill our daughter. Pierre leaned on the railing of the bridge, feeling nauseous. Where is she now? With Mehmet, in Istanbul. He still uses her to control me. Zara approached him cautiously. Pierre, you have to understand. When I met you, it wasn't part of any plan. Mehmet had sent me to Paris to establish contacts to help bring in more girls, but when I met you, for the first time in my life, I felt what it was like to be truly loved. Then why didn't you tell me the truth? Pierre turned to her. Why didn't you ask for help? I would have done anything for you. And put your life in danger too? Mehmet kills people, Pierre. I've seen him do it. If he knew I had told you the truth, he would kill us both. Pierre remembered all the times Mehmet had called, always friendly, always grateful for the money Pierre sent. So the money I sent went straight to his trafficking operations, Zara confirmed. Mehmet thought it was brilliant. He said you were the perfect idiot, unwittingly financing the crimes for which his wife had died. The anger Pierre felt at that moment was unlike anything he had ever experienced. And my death, why did they fake that? Because I was trying to escape, Zara explained. After 2 years with you, I couldn't live the lie anymore. I was planning to tell you everything, ask for your help to get Elif out of Turkey and start a new life. But Mehmet found out. How? He made me give him regular reports on my contacts in Paris. When I started talking less about work and more about our life together, he became suspicious. He sent someone to spy on me. Pierre remembered the last phone call, how Aishi, Zara, had seemed strange and distant. In our last phone conversation, you sounded different. Mehmet was standing next to me, listening to every word, she said. That night, he gave me 2 choices. Fake my own death and come back to him, or he would kill you and our daughter. So you chose to protect me by pretending to be dead, Pierre said softly. I had no choice. And for 6 years it worked. You were safe, I was back with Mehmet, and Elif was alive. But now you're in Paris again, Pierre observed. Why? Zara's face hardened. Because Mehmet is planning something terrible. He's bringing 50 girls from Syria and Afghanistan next week. Refugees, orphans, some as young as 12. And this time he wants to use our daughter in the business too. Pierre felt a chill of horror. Use Elif how? She's getting older, more beautiful. Mehmet said it's time for her to contribute to the family. He wants to start training her to attract customers. My God, Pierre whispered. I can't let that happen, Zara continued, her voice growing firmer. I'd rather die than let my daughter be destroyed, like so many other girls I've seen pass through Mehmet's hands. So you came to Paris to find a way to stop him, and to get Elif out of there, once and for all. Pierre looked at the woman he had loved, who he still loved, despite everything. Why did you tell me all this? Why didn't you just disappear again? Because I need your help, she said simply, and because after 6 years of lies, you deserve to know the truth. What kind of help? Zara took a deep breath. Mehmet has information on all the corrupt employees who work for him, all the politicians he bribes, all the police officers he pays. He has everything documented as life insurance. If we can get that information and hand it over to the French and European authorities, we can destroy his entire network. And how do you intend to get that information? Mehmet trusts me, she said. He thinks I'm completely under his control because of Elif. He'll give me access to the files because he needs me to organize the arrival of the new girls. Pierre realized where she was going with this. You want me to help you steal that information and rescue our daughter, she added. Pierre, I know I have no right to ask for anything after what I did to you, but Elif is innocent. She doesn't deserve to pay for her parents' sins. Pierre was silent for a long moment, staring at the dark waters of the Seine. Finally, he turned to her. Our daughter. Zara bit her lip. Elif. She's not Mehmet's daughter. The world seemed to stop completely around Pierre. The city lights, the distant sound of traffic, even the wind blowing off the Seine, everything disappeared, leaving only the echo of Zara's words reverberating in his mind. What did you just say? His voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Elif is your daughter, Pierre, Zara repeated, tears now streaming freely. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks before Mehmet forced me to fake my death. It was too early to be sure, but after I returned to Turkey, the tests confirmed it. Elif was born exactly 9 months after our last night together. Pierre leaned heavily on the bridge railing, feeling his legs tremble. I have a daughter, he murmured, as if testing the words. A 9-year-old daughter I never knew. Mehmet doesn't know, Zara continued quickly. He believes she's his because I lied about the dates. I said I had gotten pregnant before traveling to Paris. He never questioned it. What is she like? Pierre asked, his voice breaking with emotion. Does she look like me? Zara smiled for the first time since they had met again, a sad but genuine smile. She has your eyes, blue like the sky, just like yours. And she's smart, Pierre, very smart. She speaks 3 languages and loves math, just like you. Pierre felt an overwhelming mixture of joy, pain, and anger. 9 years, he said. I lost 9 years of my daughter's life because of your lies. I know, Zara whispered. I know I can never forgive myself for that. But I had no choice, Pierre. If Mehmet had known she wasn't his daughter, he would have killed us both. And now he wants... Pierre couldn't finish the sentence. Now he wants to sell her, Zara finished, her voice hardening with hatred. My own daughter. Your daughter. He says she'll fetch a lot of money because she's so beautiful and young. The anger Pierre felt at that moment was primitive, animalistic. I'll kill him, he said softly. I'll find that monster and kill him with my own hands. No, Zara grabbed his arm. That's exactly what he wants. Mehmet is dangerous, Pierre. He has connections with the police, politicians, judges. If you try to confront him directly, you'll end up dead, and Elif will be even more vulnerable. So what do you propose? We have to be smart, she explained. Mehmet is bringing the 50 girls to Paris next week. They'll go through a safe house, he maintains, in the 18th arrondissement before being distributed to different European countries. Elif will be with him. He never leaves her alone when he's doing important business. How do you know all this? Because he told me. He wants me to help process the girls when they arrive. Check documents, translate, that sort of thing. Zara grimaced in disgust. He has no problem telling me the details because he thinks I'm completely under his control. Pierre started walking again, trying to think clearly. If we involve the French police, Mehmet has contacts here too, Zara interrupted him. Not all of them, but some. And even if we managed to arrest some of his men, others would take over the operation. The girls would still be sold, and Elif would be killed to prevent her from talking, Pierre added grimly. Exactly! Our only chance is to get enough evidence to destroy the entire network at once and rescue Elif before Mehmet realizes what we're doing. Pierre stopped walking and stared at Zara. Do you have a plan? I have the beginning of one, she admitted. Mehmet will arrive in Paris on Monday. Today is Friday. That gives us 3 days to prepare. Prepare for what exactly? Mehmet doesn't know you found me, right? So you can still approach him as the grieving brother-in-law. Say you're in Paris on business and would like to see him, to remember Aishi together. Pierre understood immediately. You want me to gain his trust. Mehmet always liked you, Zara explained. He said you were naive but loyal. If you show up wanting to honor the memory of his sister, he'll be touched. He might even invite you to participate in his business. What if he suspects something? Then we both die, Zara said simply. But if we don't try, our daughter becomes a sex slave, and 50 other girls too. Pierre looked at her for a long moment. Even after all the lies, all the pain she had caused, he could still see the woman he had fallen in love with. And now he knew they had a daughter together, an innocent child who needed to be saved. What do I need to do? He asked. Zara closed her eyes for a moment, clearly relieved. First, you need to help me get information about the house where they're going to keep the girls. Exact location, how many men will be guarding it, security routines. How can I find that out? Mehmet will want to impress you, she explained. Men like him love to show off their power. If you show interest, curiosity about how he honors Aishi's memory by helping other Turkish immigrants, he may even show you the operation. And you? What will your role be? I'll continue to pretend to be the obedient, traumatized wife. I'll help him with the logistics, but I'll also document everything. Names, locations, dates, bank account numbers. Everything we need to hand over to the authorities. Pierre took a deep breath. And Elif, how are we going to get her out of there? That's the most dangerous part, Zara admitted. Mehmet never leaves her alone, but during big operations like this, he gets distracted. Our only chance is during the transport of the girls. There's always a moment of chaos when they arrive and are being processed. You're talking about entering a house full of armed criminals and trying to rescue our daughter in the middle of a human trafficking operation, Pierre summarized. Yes, she confirmed. I know how impossible it seems. It's not impossible, Pierre interrupted her. It's suicidal, but you're right, we have no choice. They were silent for a few minutes, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Pierre asked, if we manage to do this, if we manage to rescue Elif and destroy Mehmet's network, what happens next? For us, I mean. Zara looked at him with an expression that mixed hope and despair. I don't know if we'll have an after, Pierre. Mehmet has enemies in many countries. Even if we manage to destroy his operation, he may have allies who will want revenge. So we're essentially signing our death warrant. It's possible, she admitted. But Pierre, I'd rather die trying to save our daughter than live knowing I abandoned her to be abused by monsters. Pierre reached out and touched Zara's face gently. Does she know anything about me? I tell her stories about you, Zara whispered. I tell her she had a father who loved her very much, but who had to leave. She always asks when you're coming back. Monday, Pierre said with determination. On Monday, I'm going to meet my daughter and get her out of this hellhole, no matter what happens to me. Zara held his hand. Pierre, you need to know that no matter what happens, you were the only good thing I ever had in my life. Loving you, even if only for a short time, was worth every moment of suffering that came after. Don't talk as if we're already dead, Pierre replied. We'll make it. We have to make it. As they walked separately back to their respective homes, they had decided they couldn't be seen together until Monday. Pierre felt a mixture of terror and determination he had never experienced before. In 3 days, he would attempt to rescue a daughter he had never known from a man who had destroyed his life. And for the first time in 6 years, Pierre Dubois had something worth dying for.